My tax is going to be
Go
cut.
down, yeah.
All right. Well, obviously, this is First Tuesdays. Both of our guests are here. I'm Mick Dumpking from ProPublica. This is
Ben Jarofsky from The Reader and the Ben Jarofsky Show.
all sorts of other things.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And thanks to all of you guys for coming out on a warm Tuesday. It's cool in here, but it's about to heat up, I sense. So without further ado, let's just get into this thing. Making the aforementioned dramatic entrance, Alderman Jeanette Taylor from the 20th Ward, Alderwoman.
Thank you.
And from the 47th Ward, the Fightin' 47th, as used to be known, Alderman Matt Martin.
Yeah. Ben Jarofsky's home ward, by the way,
That's right.
too.
I met Matt. He was going door to door. I was walking down the street and started asking him questions. I forget what I was asking you about, probably TIF related.
You
And he goes, "You're Ben." I'm like, "How the hell you know?" So that's how we met. Remember that? Yeah. That was in the runoff. I did not vote for him in the first round. We already talked about
We
that,
did.
right, Matt?
I'm okay with it.
You absolved me.
Yeah.
Well, there was another guy in the race I voted
We had
for.
a lot of good candidates.
There's a lot of, thank you. You're very diplomatic. And I did not vote for Jeanette Taylor, but she was in a runoff in the 20th ward. I couldn't vote for you, Jeanette, because I don't live in the 20th ward.
You got to move.
I got to
small
move to the
technical-
20th ward.
Small technicality
Yeah.
in our election rules here, Ben. Yeah.
So anyway, two first-time aldermen, and they're learning the ropes in the Chicago City Council.
Well, let's just jump right into it.
Yeah.
How are you going to balance the budget?
Is that a trick question?
Yes.
It is
So-
what people want to know. So what do you know about the budget and sort of what ideas are being tossed around that we may or may not have heard of?
So a budget is common sense. So for those who don't know me, I was on a local school council for 22 years. And one of the things that I was always serious about was how we spend our money and where we could afford to cut and where we're wasteful. And so the city of Chicago is very wasteful. They don't, the departments don't work together. One department doesn't know what the other department is doing, and we waste a lot of y'all dollars, because they ain't just mine, they y'all dollars. And so the first thing that we kind of discussed as new alderman was to ask her to look at every department. That's the smartest thing to do. I'm just gonna say it, she got 6 deputy mayors. You don't need 6 people. Like, we could afford to cut some of that. We use 40% of the budget on police, and in my community, we don't feel safe. So I need to either get a refund or we need to figure out how we are spending our money. And so for me, that's important. And so I'm looking forward to each department coming to us and tell us what they actually spend our money on. And then us saying, no, that doesn't make sense. No, we don't need that. No, don't cut that. And then one of the biggest things that we don't realize is the city contracts out a lot. And so I'm on contract compliances. God is so good. What we spend in lawsuits, we could have paid city workers and their benefits. And so I've been fussing at them about that on a consistent basis, because and you stop me when I'm lying, on a weekly basis, we go to a briefing and they ask, well, this is the lawsuit coming up. Somebody wants $400,000. A young lady got killed by a weed cutter. The family wanted $15 million, and their insurance was only $4 million. So who paid the additional dollars? We did. And so it's things like that that lets me know that we're wasteful in a lot of ways, and that we're smart enough as the new kids on the block. That's what I call us this. I think we got more experience than a lot of them that's been there 20 years. But it's us looking at and seeing where we can cut and making sure we start to tax the right people. When I asked her about a LaSalle Street check, she was like, nope. And I was like,
The she being Mayor Lightfoot.
I had my own personal meeting. I actually got into a little fight with her. She talked about aldermanic prerogative, and let me just explain. I don't have a problem with aldermanic prerogative. I don't think aldermen should be the end all. I think there should be a community process for us to decide what we want to see in our community. What I don't like is you making decisions about my job without talking to me. And so I'm about process. And so now we're in the space where these commissioners really have the say-so. And well, they don't have a say-so in our awards, but the commissioner is the person that can say no and you say yes. And then now we're trying to figure out what is the process from there forward. And so automatic prerogative, you talk about that for a couple of bad apples. That's not for everybody that's on the council. And so for me, I want us to be able to put stuff in place that tax the rich. Any millionaires in here, I'm sorry. But you got to pay what you own. The biggest thing for me that I'm pushing is the the pilot program. And so the pilot program talks about taxing these universities and these hospitals. What we don't realize is they pay little to no taxes. They are not, but they use our water, they use the police, they use lights, gas, all of that. And the majority of the spaces that they've taken over have been in black and brown neighborhoods. So you've actually taken real estate. So if you think about the University of Chicago, they got a 70-year history of displacing folks from that community. But they'll build one building, put one nonprofit in it, and then charge all of this rent, and then are not paying taxes. And so we gonna fall out, but it's a fight. It is time and well overdue for the Chicago folks to stop paying into a system that ain't broke, because we not broke. Don't y'all believe that? We spent $931 million just on administration. What? Yeah, that's what I said. What? And the lady from the finance don't know what the city clerk doing? That does not make sense. And so there's just some things that we could do that are common sense to do this budget.
All right, Matt Martin, Alderman of the 47th Ward. Are you in line with Alderwoman Taylor there?
Absolutely. And some things I would add is, one, sorry, I'm just like going to do this in scattershot because I think that people here, like, you listen to Ben's show, you read the news, you know what's going on. So $838 million budget gap. Like, we hear that talked about a lot. I think that not in an inappropriate way, but the administration says, okay, this can be our first budget, first after Rahm Emanuel left office. It's good for us to come up with as large a number as possible, because the longer this lasts, goes on, I should say, the more we as a new administration wear this. And so some of the biggest drivers of that gap are, one, settlements and judgments, as the Alderwoman said, especially around police misconduct. We have pension obligations, as everybody knows about, that we've known about for decades, and we haven't done anything about significantly. Collective bargaining agreements, in particular police department and firefighters. And so that's where this gets a little bit fuzzy, because we say we're going to project that we will sign those CBAs sometime soon, and that there will be back pay that folks are entitled to. So they're thinking, okay, it's about this amount of money. And then finally are poor investments. So things like when the investment returns are not as robust as folks were expecting. All of that, I think, are the primary drivers for that budget gap. But as Jeanette said, we're not broke. I mean, you just need to go to our ward. Most parts of it, you can follow that all the way down to downtown, and you see the fact that we've got about 60 corporate relocations over the last 10 years, that we've got over 40 cranes operating, or at least that was the case during the campaign. I stopped counting. And so we know that really our problem is how we're using our money, but also who we're asking it from. Because when we're ticketing folks into bankruptcy, and it's like not enough to get by, and that's what the Emanuel administration did when they saw a somewhat comparable budget deficit after the second Daley left. That's a problem. When you know that we're continuing to rely on property taxes, and the series that ProPublica, working with Tribune, did, we know how corrupt that system is, and just how inequitable that is at bottom. We need to be looking for more progressive sources of revenue. And so that's something that Jeanette and I and other members of our Progressive Caucus have really been pushing, and not just saying, we think you should do this, but starting to do the work of saying, well, what does pilot look like? What does Boston do? What do these other municipalities do that have so many colleges and universities? What are we going to be asking of them? Same thing with regard to the TIF program, like really having a durable TIF surplus program where we're not doing this on a one-time basis, but on a continuing basis, because wards like ours that have some decent-sized TIFs, even after AMEA closed some of them, we don't need that TIF money, or at least most of that TIF money should be spent on things like affordable housing, which our ward lacks. And so that's what we're talking about when we're saying, hey, we have this budget gap, that's fine, but let's make sure that our budget reflects our values, and that, yeah, we're going to be in for a lot of shared sacrifice in terms of the mismanagement that happened at the city level and at the state level. But right now, new administration, new city council, I think we really have an opportunity to change the direction and change the conversation so that we're not going to be having this situation every time a new mayor comes into office.
So are you suggesting, both of you in different ways, that Mayor Lightfoot and her administration have essentially padded, they've essentially thrown out these numbers that are extra high to say that we have all these budget problems, so that gives them more flexibility to work with, more opportunities to basically have keep their political capital in storage in some ways, because they can blame Rahm for at least a year, maybe more, for the budget mess?
I don't think so. I think, look, like, as I was kind of indicating, I think there are aspects of the budget that are as much art as they are science. So this idea that you can just say at the end of the day, what's the real number, and someone can find that out, I think is a little bit illusory. So we should all know that from the outset. But also, something that was not discussed was that, one, we've been operating with a structural deficit for many, many years now. That's the case with the city, that's the case with CPS, a number of our other sister agencies, so that's not new. And so part of the art is, how do we paper over this so that we can keep our bond ratings at a particular level, so we can keep the editorial boards at a particular level in terms of how they talk about us, and all the way down. But I think more fundamentally, there are things where, look, we need to shine a spotlight on some of this stuff, because part of what the administration is doing is they said, okay, last year, I think the Emanuel administration said they budgeted about $30 million or so for police misconduct lawsuits. That number was over $100 million. $100 million. And
it's been like way over $30 million
just a little
forever.
Just a little
Yeah.
bit. And so, to the administration's credit, the current administration, they said, we're projecting to spend $113 million on these lawsuits, and most of it's police misconduct. And so I think that's good. And so are we like padding that? I'm not sure, but I think that we're on the road to being more honest about things, so that we can, as city council members, start doing our job, which is, as much as it's important that we have our finger on the pulse of the community when it comes to potholes and garbage collection, all that stuff, we need to do oversight. When we have these budget hearings, as you were saying, Jeanette, we need to be asking hard-hitting questions. And right now, we don't have enough staff in our offices, and certainly on these committees, to prep us so that we really understand the sort of questions that we should be asking. So when we're waiting for the two of you and other colleagues of yours who are journalists to really shine a spotlight, you should not be our surrogate staff. You should be holding us accountable. We shouldn't be waiting for you to hold city accountable so that we can kind of come in and ask some questions. That's, I think, something that really needs to change if we're going to start doing what you said, which is critical, which is all of that waste, all of that fraud, all of the fact that we're not a manufacturing-based economy, we're a service sector economy. We can automate certain things, which means it's not like we're putting folks out of a job, but like, let's reallocate, because who here loves 311? Who here has had a great experience with the estimated time of completion for any particular project? That's not sufficient, and so why can't we put more people to work making sure that those services that people are really needing and relying on, that's happening in a timely way?
Well, part of the problem I've been seeing more and more, and it's really crystallizing itself with this teacher showdown, is it's as though people are describing two different universes. And it's interesting that we have someone from your ward, Ravenswood area, and your ward, Woodlawn, because it does sort of represent two separate sides of the city. So, for instance, when people absorb the fact that teachers might go on strike, the general reaction I've had from people on the north side of the city is that the teachers on some kind of ego trip, and they're being misled by their union, and they got a good offer on the table, they should just take it. When I have people on the show from the south side of the city, I got 43 kids in my classroom.
That's right.
There's no nurse.
That's right.
There's no social worker. There's no art class.
There's no librarian.
And they wouldn't put up with that on the north side of the city.
That's right.
In a minute. So, Jeanette Taylor, really, I'm asking you this. Do you think you could get the entire city council to view the city budget for the impact it has on the neediest, poorest parts of the city? Or are we just going to continue just to look the other way?
So, Matt and myself are on the Black Caucus. Before I joined the Black Caucus, I said I'm not going to join just because I'm black. You all have to stand up for Black Chicago, and to Black Chicago, y'all a joke. It's 20 of us. We could do something with our vote. The 20 there and the 17 in the Progressive Caucus. We could ultimately do to her what they did to Harold Washington. Just gonna say it. Sorry, I didn't come to color code with y'all. Anybody who knows me know I say what I said, and I'll say it to their face. We have an opportunity to make this city for the many. We just do. We're in that place. And I've never met a white mother from the north side of Chicago say that your kids don't deserve the same thing that my kids got. And I've fought with plenty of groups that don't look like me. And so it's just outrageous that anybody would co-sign the teachers not going on strike. And what's interesting this time is, so my mother was a CPS clerk for 30 years before she died. And whenever the teachers would go on strike, who was taking care of the kids? The clerks, the seekers, and the principals, or the park districts. All of these entities now are going to go on strike. Who in the hell are going to be watching the kids? Ha, 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 that's what you get. Because what have they done for years? When the teachers go on strike, they conquer and divide. And so they send the kids to the park district. Or they say, you can send your kid to the school, we'll have somebody watching them. And it's not a teacher. And so for me, it's a joke to say it's just about money. It's never been about their pay. It's about the conditions in the school. I got a son who is 15. He is a special needs student. He is autistic. But he does not have enough traits to have autism. When we merged with Overton Elementary, he literally saw a speech pathologist every other day under the stairs because the school was so crowded. And when a CPS board member who was appointed, who was also the head of the urban league, told me that was okay, I cussed her out. That is not okay. Would you allow your child to be in that way? And so when do we get to a point between this right and wrong? This ain't about Democrat and Republican. This is about right and wrong. It is wrong for a child to be at a school and the nurse comes once a week. Or the school is so crowded that the nurse is seeing children at the security desk. That happened. That's the reality. People who know me know I only speak about what my lived experience is. So I'm not telling you nothing I heard or what I think. This is my lived experience. And so it's a joke that the city is saying that this strike is a power trip. It is not. I challenge you all. Take your grandbaby or tell your daughter to take them out of that school and bring them to one of the schools on the south side. And I guarantee you after one day, your child will be so traumatized that you probably will move them out of the city of Chicago. When a shooting happens in your community, it can be blocks away. They send a crisis team. I know family members who've lost their mother, their father, and their aunt, and the crisis team has not showed up to that school. So you tell me what's righteous, because this is not. Look, I love being a community organizer. I get to come home. People ain't calling me all night long. I am in this position because I am tired of people who make $120,000 a year, get a pension for the rest of their life, then they get in office and forget about the people they're supposed to represent. And so there is a new day in Chicago because us new kids on the block, they confused. First of all, they don't know how we got there. They are so confused, especially me. Now, might have had a chance, but me, they like, how in the hell did y'all let this woman win? I'm like, I know next cycle, y'all gonna use y'all dollars for something else. It's gonna be to elect another person, not me. But we got an opportunity to make it right. We do. Lori does not, she is not the machine. But let's be honest, she the po-po. She the police. She is. I haven't heard, now you rescue my, I haven't heard her say one thing about cutting that police budget, but she gonna do it. She is not gonna have no choice. We're just gonna be in a fight. We're never going home, Matt. I just gotta tell you, we're never going home.
All right, I gotta jump in here. Couple things. Lori's the police. I mean, we've heard that. She's never been on the police department. I know she's been a prosecutor. So explain what you mean by that. She also has made headlines for attacking the police union.
She sat on the police board and told Rakia Boyd's family after she hadn't been there 2 months, she kicked them out of the police board meeting. Rakia Boyd was a black woman doing absolutely nothing and was killed by a police officer. She kicked that family out of, when they do the little COPA board and they do testimony, she kicked that family out. I was there. We don't do that to family. We don't say it's okay. Then my recommendation to her was, make the police take out their own damn insurance. I'm tired of paying for their lawsuits. I guarantee you, if they got to pay for their own lawsuits, we see a whole different type of police style. And we got to go back to regular policing. I hate that there is this us against the police, because it's not. I remember Officer Friendly. I remember knowing every police officer in my district. I remember I skipped school once, and they picked me up and took me to the school. Now, you know I got in trouble, because my mama worked at the school, so I don't know how stupid I was to ditch school, but I did. But that's what I'm used to. I'm used to people getting out of their cars being sociable. That is not what we have today. And so we got to have real, honest conversations about the police. And I ain't heard her say it. That I could come up with, I could come up with all the sound bites in the world. It's my work that makes people believe me. I'm willing to roll up. And that's what I want to see from Lori. I don't want her to fail. I want her to roll up her sleeves and get in this work like we have. That's what I want from her. But
So I can provide a little bit of additional context, which is in the conversations that I've had with Lori and with her Chief of Staff, Maurice Glosson, a number of things about the police department that we've discussed I found encouraging. I think that when you look at some numbers and say, our homicide and gun violence clearance rates are among the lowest of any major city in the entire country, despite the fact that, as Jeanette said, for our corporate fund, which is the biggest pool of money that we have access or control over in the budget, that's 40% just CPD alone, that we spend more on police misconduct lawsuits than New York and LA combined, despite the fact that they have fewer murders. So we've got a lot of problems that these statistics, which they're never going to be able to capture the entire picture, and so we should always know that. But in terms of some of the conversations that we need to have, especially in sound bites, that stuff to me shows that we have a real problem, not with any particular police officer or two, but with an entire culture where we've had too often a city council that's not going to provide oversight, and a mayor's office that's really hyper focused on how they look day to day in the press. No knock on your work, it's important, but I mean, we have to take a longer view with this. And so these are statistics that they themselves know. And they were talking with me about that and saying, look, if we have a 10-year high in the number of officers, almost 4,000 more than the city of LA, but we have the outcomes that we have, public safety, criminal justice reform, any way you want to talk about this, it's got to be more than the police department. It's just got to be more than the police department. If we have a situation where we've seen 2,000 additional officers join the force over the last several years, but people still don't know any of their beat cops, we've got a problem. Because we in the city of Chicago, we were the national model for community policing in the mid-1990s. We brought that stuff about, and we let that stuff die on the vine. And I think that that's just as big a reason for why we've seen what we've seen over the last 5 years as anything else. I think there's a shared understanding, I feel, at the high level with the administration and with many members of city council about what the problems are. It's really timing. It's how hard are we going to push in terms of having, whether it's the police department, whether it's CPS, any number of entities, things that are going to be in a contract like a consent decree that hold all of us accountable, and also having resources that match those timelines so that we're not just blowing past them all the time, but starting to meet those fundamental things.
Well, if you want to have beat integrity, as it's called, with the police department, where back in the day, basically there was one car per beat. That's why some beats are bigger and some are smaller geographically, because the thinking was years ago, decades ago, when they drew up the districts and drew up the beats, the thinking was, well, beat A doesn't have that much activity, so the officers there can control a bigger area. Beat B has a lot of activity, so we've got to make it smaller so they can cover the whole area. None of that matters anymore, because as you both know, as most people probably know, we've had basically stat-driven policing. Right before the show, Ben and I were complaining about analytics in sports, which is a whole other thing. But there's analytics in the police department, too, and there had been for years. Cops on dots, they also call it. So where crime statistics seem to go up, simplest terms, there are more officers sent there, but it's not the same officers. If you go to community policing meetings, which you probably do in your jobs, you never see the same officers come to the beat meetings. What I'm leading up to for question for you guys is, both of you, would you be willing to find the money? Can you find the money to make sure that we have police officers to stay in their beats? What I've been told through the years is one of the reasons we've done this cops on dots approach is because it's cheaper. You can send people around. You can make them mobile. You don't have to have a committed set of resources for every single beat. And so that's just been the thinking for a very long time. And even though we had a community policing program, there never was beat integrity, even in the 90s. They were moving people around. What there was a lot of attention given, someone argued mostly on the PR side, for the CAPS program, which totally has withered on the vine. So long-winded question, a little more context, but do you both feel that there are resources available to make this happen? Even if you had to spend more money initially, do you think it would pay for itself over time?
Well, so I think I feel very strongly that we have enough resources right now in the police department, and the question is, how are we deploying them as efficiently as possible? Because I'll cite, those numbers and things that I don't want to say that again, but that stuff, while I don't want that to be the only thing, that to me shows like we've got enough, and it's just a question of how we're utilizing this. So we know, for example, that even though those numbers are going up, that we've seen increasingly in certain districts a hard time to have beat continuity or to be able to send additional officers if we have a high-profile incident, especially a shooting. And so it makes no sense that we're having a harder time providing beat cops despite a rising number of folks in the force. And part of what I understand is a driver for that is you've got special tactical units that are going to different parts of the city that are supposedly tackling particular waves of issues, whether it's a robbery, a burglary, something of the like. But we don't know in the budget. I challenge anybody here, find out how many people are being deployed in that way. I mean, we don't have that information. That's not information that historically is provided to city council. So until we have that sort of information where we can ask those questions, it's really challenging. But at bottom, look, I think we need to fundamentally reorient the way that we're thinking about community policing, how folks are going to be engaged in this, because I always think about like the police officers, the folks that you want to talk to help spread information, but they're not just there to prevent a crime from occurring, or especially responding to a crime after it's already happened. Like it's more than that, and I think it speaks to deeper issues around disinvestment, segregation throughout the city, because it's not just a policing problem. So we could talk about, okay, if we had $113 million a year of additional money that we're not spending on police misconduct lawsuits, okay, but we also in these conversations need to be talking about what are we going to do from a development standpoint when the city is spending roughly comparable amounts of money all across the city, but a ward like ours is getting 3 times the amount of private dollar investment. That's where I feel like the city has a job to do, where I can count on one hand the number of real vacant lots that we have. And I mean, I don't know if there are enough fingers. Yeah, not enough fingers and toes in this entire room. So
I have 2,000 vacant lots across the 20th ward. In Woodlawn and Washington Park, where the OPC is coming, it's 1,000. And so I sit on 4 different police districts. I sit on the 2nd, the 3rd, the 7th, and the 9th. The only offices that I see on a consistent basis that look the same are the business offices. Every time you turn around, there's a different beat officer. And so because remember, what is Chicago a city built on? Relationships. We don't have the relationships because they keep changing folks. They just do. And we don't get, so in one of my wards, and I won't call out the commander yet because I'm trying to give him an opportunity to do his job, but he, a part of the ward is Latino, a part of the ward is Chinese, Vietnamese, and then it's Bridgeport. So you can kind of get who the commander is. For the Chinese and Vietnamese and Bridgeport, you won't see a piece of paper on the floor. You get to my ward, I was literally in Ghana getting calls at 4 in the morning about folks riding up on the block, taking out their chairs and playing music on the sidewalk, and they don't live there. And when these folks were calling, because they're homeowners, they're renters, they're people who live there, the people at the police station was mad. Like, you keep calling. I was like, can y'all put the sergeant on the phone? I said, I'm in Ghana. And if I have to come back home early because my constituents calling me because you all can't do your job, it is not going to be nice. They called me back at about 4:30 and said, it's clear over here, we can hear. I shouldn't have to do that. After they didn't call 911, after they didn't call the police station and told they called too much, the response is definitely different. I promise you, this sign says, there is kindness and goodness. I wish it would come to the South and West Sides because there is just a non-respect there. I spend the majority of my time cussing out city departments, CTA, CPS, the park districts, because it is in such poor condition in my community. And when I'm saying to them, why is this grass not cut? Or why is this park not clean? It's like, who am I to ask? I'm the person that's paying taxes like everybody else. That's who I am to ask. Now, if you like working this job, I suggest you do it. Because if you don't, I'm not just going to send Lori no letter. I'm going right to being show and call you out. And I don't like doing that. I tell people all the time, I don't like being on the news, the radio, none of that. Because stuff just comes out of my mouth. And it's the truth. And I'm transparent in that way. But I shouldn't have to do that. It's just like we having a conversation around the menu money. We all get $1.3 million. In Matt's ward, okay. He could get that. It could get his streets done over and over again. $1.3 million in my ward probably gets 3 streets done in Woodline, Washington Park, back of the yards, New City, Greater Grand Crossing, and Inglewood, because that's the 20th ward. I can't get anything done, or you won't notice it. And so it's like there is the tale of two cities, and we got to talk about equity. That's the biggest part with the police, equity. It ain't equitable. I guarantee it in Matt's community. Matt, you know most all the police officers, don't you?
No.
You know enough of them. I know 4, and I'm in 4 different police districts. I know 4. That's not me being a bad constituent or a citizen. That's a city that does not respect all of the citizens. They've chosen what they're going to do best. And we got an opportunity, y'all, to stand up. I tell people all the time, let's fight together. Let's fight the good fight together.
All right.
Well, are you ready for the ward remap? Because that's partly what that comes down to. I know we don't want to get too far down that
Jesus
rabbit
Christ.
hole.
I'm so sick of the ward remap already.
It's 2 years.
Like, damn, I just got here. Like, can I get the grass cut and the tree trims first before y'all start talking about that? It's like it's never ending. I can't wait until the grass is gone and the leaves are gone. I can't wait. I would rather shovel snow. I'm so sick of trees, but that's because I got so many empty lots in my community. It takes a lot. And so I ask people to volunteer to cut some of those lots and get that grass up. That's how many. Don't even talk about the remap. I don't even drink, and I'm going to need a drink. You start talking about the remap.
Well, you talk about inequity. It's a natural jump to the fact that right now you're in the heart of one of the biggest TIF deals in the city of Chicago. You're right across the street from, we're all surrounded by the Lincoln Yards TIF, and I can't blame either one of you for that.
That's right, we just got here.
Well, yeah, and the final vote, the vote to approve that deal went down at the last city council meeting before your class came in.
They knew what they was doing.
Yeah, they knew what they were doing. Well, I would like to think that your class would not have voted for the deal, but we'll never know. So my question is this. The city went to court. Lori Lightfoot sent lawyers to court to fight the lawsuit that was trying to topple that. And we keep talking about the fundamental inequities in the city of Chicago, and everybody says they want to use our resources fairly and adequately to bridge this difference. I don't know how it gets more dramatic than spending all the money here in this area, and your neck of the woods doesn't receive even close to that.
We're on 6 TIF districts. And I found out in running that $25 million from those 6 districts over some years went to the Wind Trust, Navy Pier.
Yeah.
So when I go to the Rent Trust now, I'm like, I paid for this already. Why am I rebuying a ticket? And I don't even like Navy Pier, but I'm going to go since they use my tax dollars for it.
So is there any inclination on the part of aldermen to finally address this and talk about redistributing this money in a more fair, equitable way? Or when you come in there, are you just told by the other aldermen, just keep your head down, keep your mouth shut, you'll get yours, your ward will get yours? don't make waves. Is that the attitude that you're getting?
I don't think so. I mean, first of all, I don't know that any significant or even modest TIF proposal, like the creation of a new TIF, has been moving forward in any manner since we joined. So it'll be new. Like, that's going to happen at some point. I won't say who, but one of our colleagues at the last city council meeting introduced an ordinance to create a new TIF. So that'll be really interesting, because I think, look, on the one hand, I know that a lot of folks say, look, how many times have you been in my ward? How do you know what's better for my ward than me? And so if you don't want to have TIFs in your ward, that's fine. You want to close them down early, that's fine. But don't take this off the table for me, especially when you've got developers busting down your doors looking to build stuff, and no one's looking to do that here. So, like, I hear that. I know that. And so I think part of how I approach that is, I can't just go in and say no. I need to have a conversation with folks, a series of conversations, and be able to say, look, like, if I'm going to say no, I'm going to say no, but I also want to partner with you to make sure that you get the things that you need. And then I think the trickier part is, how are we going to make sure that that happens? Because, like, let's not forget, we have a system where, like, over a series of decades, we have made intentional decisions so that something like Lincoln Yards is going to happen here, something like 78 is going to happen there, but you're not going to have investment in other places. That's a series of intentional decisions. In order to roll that back, we need to get really thoughtful about what are we going to do to make sure that tens of millions of dollars, really hundreds of millions of dollars, are going to go to those areas where they were starved because of redlining, because of blockbusting, because of restrictive covenants. Our city has never been honest about that, nor have we in any meaningful way talked about what the next steps are in terms of addressing that. I mean, the best we can do is have a resolution that might get supported, so you have one hearing, there are no next steps, and that's the end of it. So, look, I know that in the short term we can say, from a budget standpoint, whether it's CPS or the city, it's going to be, I think, politically popular, and I think it's the correct decision to look at folding these in early to surplus those TIF funds, but it's not going to do anything for the larger problem. And the reason why these TIF deals continue to happen outside of these mega projects, which is, what are we going to do in other pockets of the city? And that's where, look, I hate to say, like, give us time, be patient, because I think the reason why we won, and some of the reason why we were successful, was we were feeling radically impatient, and we wanted to communicate that to folks. But we do need to do, I think, a better job of working with the departments who do have more resources to figure out, if not TIFs, like, what else are we going to do? How, like, we need to get creative. We need to have tools that are based on 21st century principles, but also blow some of this stuff up, to be honest, because it's not working. It's not sustainable for our city.
Ben, you still with us? He's talking about blowing up TIFs.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
all right?
Well, I remember his predecessor used to talk about that when he first got into office, or when he first ran for office. Jeanette, before we take it, open it up to questions to the audience, we might as well talk. You mentioned it briefly, the Obama Presidential Center. It's your neck of the woods. I don't believe it's exactly in your ward, but it's just outside your ward. Why don't you give folks a little update on your attitude toward the Obama Presidential Center? Always
Try not to get too excited about it and everything. Yeah.
Actually, I get up every day and pray that I don't cuss about this center. Where are we? So we did introduce the CBA ordinance. We did, and it's to ask for a property tax freeze for 9 years. It's the right of first refusal. It talks about making sure that anything that's built on city property, 30% is affordable. Not a lot to ask for, right? Part of the problem in Woodlawn and Washington Park, we got homeowners against renters. So I'm a renter. I like being a renter. I don't want a home. I don't want that responsibility. And so that's kind of where we are in the fight today. So, they got the new housing commissioner. So I'm meeting with her with everything about the OPC. So there are all these arguments. First of all, they were given the land for 99 years for $10. I can't get 3 boxes of cereal and a gallon of milk for $10, but they could give them this land. That's problem number one. Problem number two, the community benefits agreement should have been done on the front end. I don't know if people realize when they built the United Center, there is a deal that says they got a property tax freeze when it was built, and every year they pay the difference, the United Center. The problem with this is it's a nonprofit. So I get phone calls on a consistent basis on, will you not call the CBA ordinance? What could we give you so that you can back off? So I get those calls all the time, and it's like, I need y'all to Google me because I'm not a person that backs down. So the coalition has met with the city, a gentleman that is one of the lawyers, what's his name, Samir, and I listened, I heard, I let the community talk, and at the end of the day, I was like, you know what? I'm not going through this with y'all. When they out here protesting, I'm going to be out here with them. Because I'm tired of us not making the South and West Sides a priority. If this was anywhere else, this would have been done with a snap of a finger. I wouldn't have had to call an ordinance. I wouldn't have had to introduce it. I wouldn't have went through all of this foolishness. But now it's because and gentrification happens. It happens. It happened in Pilsen. It happened in Bronzeville. It's how I got to Woodlawn. So we're not going to stop it, but we can protect the class of people that's there. And that's all I want to do. I haven't met with one developer who said to me, I can't do 30%. And they ain't asking me for none of my money. I ain't giving them none. They ain't getting a tip dollar. They ain't getting nothing from me. I don't got it. My tip dollars is going to build for small businesses, because during the election, I saw a lot of folks who were running business out of their homes, and they're going to my schools because they starving the hell out of my schools. That's it. We ain't giving it to no developer. No, 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 no. Somebody has to say no. Liquor Yard was an empty damn TIF. Let's talk about it. It was an empty TIF. They poured money. That's the first law that need to come into place. Thou shalt not port TIFs. I'll introduce that and sign my name to it. Meeting with the foundation in the different groups. So I've gotten them in the room once because they was going back and forth on Next Door Neighbor. They want Facebook, Twitter. I just got sick of it. So I said, let's all get in the room and have the conversation. What I realized is we don't really disagree. There are some bits and pieces. So the thought that you got to put money in this trust, people like, wait a minute. And y'all know who don't want to do that. The University of Chicago. Always. I just wish they would move. Could they pick their university up and move? I'm so sick of them. They got all of these groups. So there's Emerald South. I call them Follow the Yellow Brick Road, because it's a made-up group where they got Arnie Duncan and Andre Zopp. They are major fuck-ups in Chicago. Why would we ask them to be a part of anything? Andrea Zopp fucked up Chicago public schools and closed 50 schools. Arnie Duncan fucked up the United States education system. We don't need them to be the heads of nothing. Matter of fact, they need to both go sit in a corner somewhere. So because I'm an organizer, now you know organizers, we different. After 2 meetings, we turn over the damn table. And if you don't believe me, ask Rom, because I turned over plenty of tables. He hated me, but it's okay. Bye, Rom. See you later. But it's time for us to get in the room and work it out. I say something, one of my favorite comedians is Paul Mooney, and he says either we gonna hang together or we gonna hang together. And y'all old enough to know what that means. And so it's just time for us to do this on the front end. And this could be a model for any large project that comes to communities. Because I lived in Bronzeville. We got the Harold Washington Cultural Centers. The rents went up. I went from paying $500 to $800. I'm like, I can't stay here. And so one of the only places I could move and afford was Woodlawn. We don't realize when they closed them 50 schools, a large percent of those young people moved out of the state. So we gonna lose seats. That's why I don't even want to talk about it. When they do this redistricting, the South and West Sides are in trouble. So I don't want to do it. So the OPC is yeah. I don't even have words for it because I feel like I done got on my cuss limit. But I'm at the place where we cannot allow people just to build in our neighborhoods. And I said this before and I'll say it again. I don't care if it's Obama. I don't care if it's Beyonce. I don't care if it's Queen Elizabeth. We got to make sure that we are protected. Our trust has been betrayed so many times in the Black and brown community. How many times people come with their wonderful programs, they free, they get you to take pictures and say it's good, then next year here they come with the bill. Like, hell no, you just use us for all your promotion for free? And now, so we're not going to do that then. We're not going to do it for the 4 years I'm here. We're not going to do it. We're just not. And we're at a space where here come all the investors. I need you sometimes at some of these meetings because it keep me from going like, if y'all don't get y'all ass from up out of my office, ain't that much transparency in the world if you're going to come to me and say, I want to build a weed dispensary. I'm so tired of hearing about cannabis. We didn't locked up enough people in my community with cannabis. We don't want that shit. Take it somewhere. Same thing with the casino. Put that shit downtown. We don't want the traffic or the trash. And it's not going to turn in the same amount of dollars as Indiana. So like, okay, that's the magic bullet you think that's going to fix Chicago? Good luck.
Well, that casino is a long way from coming to Chicago. We just learned that. I hope the city is not anticipating any money from the casino to pay its bills in this next budget, Matt Martin, because that casino is not coming to the city anytime.
Well, no, now there's the proposal to bring in video gambling, which is like a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But let's go to some questions from the audience, right? Yeah.
I saw you during your campaign somewhere, because I go to a lot of things, and so it was about a year ago, maybe. And you, but it was an audience kind of like this, but maybe a little more diverse. And you kind of shouted out, like you do, we don't need no more police, right? Well, the audience, right, went, what? You know? So it seems, that's what you're saying tonight, that you need equity in the distribution of the police or the dots. And my question is, why aren't we saying that to the schools, to the school district, that we need equity, not equality? We don't need the same amount of money to every school. We need more money in your ward than you do in my ward. You know, you need more money than the Ogden School, for instance.
So we've been saying that for years. Nobody will listen. It's one of the reasons why my friends at organizing are now getting on my nerves. Because remember, we could never get a foot in the door. Now they done gave me the key to let everybody in. So like I got a swipe key and I'll just be like, y'all come on back here. I didn't let y'all in. Go protest on whoever you need to protest except for me. But we've been saying that for years, even at the state level. I spent a lot of time in educational districts. So I came from Kenwood Oakland Community Organization. It's the oldest African-American organization in the city. Our first executive director was Jesse Jackson before he started Rainbow Push. And so Rosia is here, one of my girls from who I go to Springfield and fight with all the time. We've been saying that for years, that we got to have equity in these schools. There's a tale of two cities. I will never forget when we were on the hunger strike. Parents from the Lincoln School, I want to say, is that the school? Yeah. I was on the hunger strike. I don't remember nothing. I just remember being hungry. I remember them telling them Ron wanted to build an annex, and they were saying, take the money back. We don't want it. Now, if these families and parents and teachers and students and principals can say they want the money, why the hell are you not listening? It's not us. It's the people who are controlling City Hall. It's why we even here. And so we've been saying that same thing for years. CPS is another wasteful ass entity. Forever, forever, ever, forever, ever. I'm an 80s baby. My kids are 29, 27, 26, 15, and 14. When my 29-year-old was in the 10th grade, he was using the books that had my damn name in it. Where do they do that at? On the south and west sides. I used to take parents to schools on the north side all the time, just so they could see the inequities that happen in our school versus you all. So that's the fight we have it, but they keep recycling the same old Negroes. You got Janice, she ain't no good. You had John Clark Bazaar, he wasn't no good. You had Barbara Bird Bennett. Stop recycling fools. They don't know. Get a real educator that's just like the principal. Did you see Brandon and Candace's show on Sunset? You a radio host, so you don't watch other shows. They had the guy from the principal.
I was sleeping.
I'm sure you was, but I get up. They had the guy from the Principals Association.
Oh, Troy Lorab.
Yeah, and what I wish he would have said was, if them teachers gonna strike, we gonna strike too. But of course, what is it? Conquer and divide. It's like we got to get to a place to say, nope, they kids striking, we striking. Their schools are inequitable, we don't want it. No, we got to get to that place.
Well, in defense of Troy, they can't go on strike because they're not in a union. So maybe they should form a union.
And I'll add one thing to that, which is, so in our ward, in 47th Ward, We have a number of schools that are highly regarded for a lot of reasons, and I think one reason is from a resource standpoint, even though it's not like certain private schools that you're going to see in and around the downtown area, but you do have folks who can reach in their pocketbooks to fund the basics, fund some of the things that we're actually seeing CTU and to a lesser extent SEIU 73 fight over right now. And so I think it's one thing when we have the state weigh in a little while ago, they say, okay, we're going to do this equity-based funding formula. So tell us how many students you have, how many are low income, how many have special needs, all that stuff. And we're going to spit out like this formula that says, here's how much money you need to provide an adequate baseline level education. And so we've seen that for all those schools. For 47, at one point, I haven't looked at it most recently, but it's around $1 million gap for each one of our local elementary schools in terms of what they get and what this formula says they need. For high schools, it's closer to $5 million. But with our elementary schools, we can have populations fundraise anywhere from $500,000 to $800,000 a year with some regularity, again, for the basics. We're talking about special education classroom assistants. We're talking about librarians, social workers. I've talked with folks in our ward where they say one of the biggest problems that the administrators see is inadequate number of social workers and case managers. Someone's got to do that work because the kids have IEPs where they're required by law to have a certain number of hours where person A, person Y, person Z is talking to them. And so it's principals who have to do some of that stuff. It's other folks who aren't always the most qualified to do that, but they know if I don't do this, we're going to violate the law. And they're put in a really terrible situation. And so I think that we need to get out of a funding formula where it's kind of this quasi-private approach whereby the quality of the education too often depends on a parent's ability to contribute, whether it's a private school certainly or even our public schools. We need to get away from that. And that's where I think coming full circle to our conversation around the budget, that's why this stuff matters. Because I do feel at some point it shouldn't be the case that a person's school is dependent on how much money the parents can raise. That's not right. That doesn't reflect our values. It's a different conversation statewide maybe, different conversation across the entire country, but I think that's something that a vast majority of Chicagoans can agree upon, and then it's up to us elected officials to actually have policies in place that reflect that, and that's what we're fighting for right now.
Hand waving frantically in the back.
Yeah, hi. I'm a CPS parent, and thank you, Matt. You just said in such a measured way what the reality has been. I have 2 children in 2 different schools in your ward, but I am more concerned about the district as a whole and what's happening in your ward. So my question is, I guess, 2 parts, is what else do you, Alderperson Taylor, I'm sorry, want us to do as parents, like, because I don't know if you've had Wendy Catton as a guest here or not, but I brought her, you know what, raise your hand, right. So you know what some of us have been trying to do in terms of showing up and protesting. So what else do you want us to do, A? And B, my concern, Matt, and Alderperson Taylor, is about the local school councils and how they may or may not, and I've been a local school council person as well, have too much power over these principals who are trying to do what's best for their communities as a whole and their schools as a whole. But there's agendas of parents who are just like coming in and buying $1 million houses. Like I said, my children are in the 47th ward, and then trying to dictate how the school should be run to the detriment of the students district-wide. And last but not least, I know Sarah Karp, who's been a guest here, said she was working on a story about the fundraising groups, the Friends of, and I've been a treasurer of a Friends of group, and which widens that gap of disparity. Do you, too, have opinions on local school councils, and is it just the state law that needs to be changed about and principals having power over helping students in your wards?
Ooh, so local school councils, if we take them out the hands of Chicago Public School, they'll probably do what Harold Washington wanted them to do, which was to have some local accountability. I do agree, because CPS does not do a good job at really training parents. It's how I came across Coco. I was on the local school council, and if the principal said jump off the bridge, I was like, well, she got the degree, let me jump. And that's the truth. That's my lived experience. That's how I thought it was. It wasn't until I started reading state law, because part of the problem is CPS little tricky book say something totally different in state law. And so you confuse the people about their power. And smart local school councils work with the school. And so I was one of those local school council members where I got all the problems. And when I got to the meeting, I told all of the problems. I feel sorry for principals. While principals are the solution, they are also the problem because they really have no say-so. And they keep recycling. Like we do that in Chicago. I can't figure out why. They recycle these teachers and principals from different schools that didn't work somewhere else, or they got fired for something and then they put them somewhere else. So that's a problem. I agree. We as community members cannot get into, I'm not on the local school council, so I don't come to the meeting. Remember, we're able to make this change when everybody's eyes are on that. And so when you talk about special needs children, there are not supposed to be more than 10 special needs students in the classroom, and some of them have designated aides. I've seen it where they've had 20 and only one student had an aide. That's why we gotta be able to call in. Isby, I'm so glad they got rid of Meeks out of that. Oh, Jesus. Somebody else special that shouldn't have been there. Oh, we just recycle the same old. Anyway, raise your hand. I love raise your hand. So Wendy, Joy is a good friend of mine because there are some white mothers. I'm just gonna say it, and I talk about race here. We be afraid to talk about race. I'm not, because we all bleed red. They've been in a lot of fights with us around LSCs for All. So LSC for All is a law that we're pushing at the state to say that every school that receives public dollars should have a LSC. Charters, everybody. You should have some type of local accountability. We're down there. We've been fighting, and I'm going to just tell y'all, I'm going to be mad at every last one of y'all if we don't get that damn elected school board. I'm going to need somebody to clap. We're the only school district in the state of Illinois that has an appointed school board. It's why our school system is so crappy. Good Lord, how many times y'all gonna keep appointing fools? And don't get me wrong, I love some of the people on the board now. Well, just one, Elizabeth. I knew her. She held my hand when I was going crazy on the hunger strike. I told her, don't hold my hand. You look like a cheeseburger. I'm hungry. But we need that elected school board like day before yesterday because those appointed people are the problem. School-wide, we got it figured out. I think at the school base, I do agree. You do have people who move in our community. They paid $1 million for their home. And I've had mothers come to tell me, I don't want my kids going to school with your kids. And I'm like, well, then you should move because me and my kids ain't going nowhere. I'm on the LSC. I know my power. And so it's some shared work we have to do. That Friends of, Mollison only raised $200. Our parents just don't have it. I would love for the Friends of the North Side to come to the Friends of the South Side and give us some of that money y'all raised. Help us out. It would buy simple things like Gigi, a math program. It would pay for a person. It would pay for us to have books. It would pay for somebody to come in and fix the computer. And so when it comes to educational justice, we all that get together. Now, I hate charter schools.
Well, so, I mean, that's what taxes are for. Taxes are for those basic things where it's not up to folks to say, well, I'm going to fundraise for this school, and then I'm going to, like, have a series of probably, like, really contentious conversations. Like, that's, like, a real big issue where we just, like, I don't think we can talk about it enough. Like, there are times where I feel like it's important to compel people to spend money on things that they're already spending on for their own families and for themselves to make sure that everybody has that same baseline. So that's one. So I was on an LSC. I joined shortly after my son was born because I said, okay, like I happen to be in the one area of the ward where we don't have the most popular at the time elementary school where people were just like fighting over themselves to find that $1 million home to live close to. And so I was like, okay, I just don't know a lot about it because a lot of my neighbors who have a small kid, they don't send their kid there, so I want to learn more about it. Like in short, great school, by the way, happens to be predominantly minority, predominantly low income, a higher than average number of students who have special needs. So I think that plays a role. But I remember going to that first meeting, or really the first budget meeting, principal comes, and it was one of the most disempowering things I've ever come across from a local standpoint, because I joined in part thinking, I want to help, hopefully not like too selfish of a way, as a community rep on the LSC, determine how we want to spend this money so that when my son was ready to attend, it was like awesome and like I think a perfect fit for him. So we get there, and it's just a conversation about how do we cut the smallest number of people. Like there wasn't a conversation around we can spend money on this or spend money on that. How do we want to brand ourselves? What sort of niche do we want to occupy? What are the needs of the kids that are unique to this school relative to other schools? It was just like huge cuts are coming. It was the same thing last year. It was the same thing the year before that. So that was the process that we were in, which I think is terrible. And that's what we need to get out of. To your final point about like a small number of parents like taking over, deciding who the principal is going to be in a problematic way. I mean, I think, look, like we see that replicated in bigger situations. I mean, look at how few people voted for the mayoral election, despite the fact that everyone agrees in many ways our city's a dumpster fire. In so many ways, whether it's housing, whether it's public safety, whether it's our budget, but people like can't come out to vote. Why is that the case? And it's the same thing with those local school councils. I know in our ward, so many people move there and decide to stay there because of the quality of our schools. But even with that, we just don't have enough people getting active in the local school council. So like we can help that stuff out. But to your point, if we had an elected school board that was really, that folks were campaigning, talking about how do we get more people active with local school councils? How do we start passing a CPS budget that reflects our values? I think that's where we start to see the sort of change that we're all hungering for. But right now, I mean, like, why don't we have that? So, I mean, one step, like, whoever your state rep is and your state senator, contact them, ask them where do they stand on that, because we have a veto session coming up, and then talk with your friends who have different state reps and state senators. I mean, that's the sort of stuff. It's just grassroots. It's just like shoe leather. We just need to let people know like that we need to have a vote on that, and that needs to get passed ASAP.
Well, they were busy with casinos and cannabis, so there you go.
We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Hi, thank you. CPS is like obviously a big an important issue in the city. I'm a former teacher, but a lot of the funding also comes like from the state. But you said that 40% of the city's budget is dedicated to the police, and so you guys obviously have a lot of leverage. And you're talking about how you have 20 people in the Black Caucus, 17 people in the Progressive Caucus. So you guys have a lot of leverage also in City Council. So what are like the concrete levers that we can, I guess you guys on the City Council can use to keep the police, the Chicago Police Department accountable, reform them in like concrete ways, because obviously that's a huge issue that we've talked about tonight.
I'll go first. So this is actually an issue that I have found probably the single most frustrating issue as a new council member, and it's so Mick, you wrote an article a little while ago talking about staff for committees, and you think, oh, you have a finance committee and you've got staffers, they're going to look into revenue and how we should bring in new revenue. Budget committee, same thing. Public safety committee, and then you look into this stuff and you learn that, unsurprisingly, it's just another tool of patronage. It's another tool of maintaining the machine, whereby you get that position not because you're super well versed in those issues or you've got great ideas. It's because you're going to deliver the sort of votes and maybe more importantly, keep issues from being heard in those committees in service of what the mayor wants. And the mayor, in turn, historically would say, okay, you get this committee with all these folks and take them to your ward offices and help provide those constituent services that will help you get reelected. So to be honest, we're just not in a position right now where we can do the kind of job that people need. We're hustling. We brought in a new executive director for the Progressive Caucus. We're reaching out to lots of organizations, including United Working Families, who have some more resources than we have in the short term to workshop this stuff. But man, like, I think that's one of the single biggest issues, low-hanging fruit, where if we saw some fundamental reform there, then we would start to see the oversight. We would have folks asking questions, and we would also have those staff working on policies as opposed to answering questions about tree trimming and garbage collection.
And just to throw in a quick anecdote, the most of the legislation that went through the Public Safety Committee, formerly known as the Police and Fire Committee, over the last number of years had to do with donations of used fire trucks and police vehicles to other towns, which worthy to recycle that equipment. But think about everything that's happened over the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years in Chicago, and that's the main issue that the Public Safety Committee has chosen to take up, while blocking various other initiatives, to your point. So it's not just what time is wasted in the committee, but it's also what legislation that is introduced by thoughtful members of the council that never even gets a hearing.
Yeah, and I want to put a coda on that, because I was reading this earlier today about John Arena, and he had this project in his ward where some people say his advocacy for that was a big reason why he lost his election. And so after he lost, but there was still about a month and a half before the transition happened, there was I think a hearing in one of the committees to advance the ball, and one of his then colleagues, I won't name names, invoked essentially do we have a quorum here? Do we have a majority of folks here? And that's something that is specifically used to stymie the few good ideas that people are pushing forward, progressives. And because when people are voting on these things, day or committee meeting here and there, where it's baloney. It's not stuff where you need city council to take a leadership role. People don't show up. And so if someone says, okay, I've got this one thing that I really want to push forward, it's important, and then someone's going to say, I don't think we have a majority of people here, so we're just going to have to wait until next month because these committees only meet once a month. I mean, it's ridiculous.
You left out they meet at the same time, so you running from meeting to meeting to meeting. It's special. It's real special. And so I've asked us new kids on the block, that's what I'm gonna call us right now, to send out a letter and say, can we not have the committees at the same time? And then y'all know now when you go to city council, it's a lottery. So it ain't who first come, first get to speak. Now they put your name in the bowl and then they decide who gets to speak. It's like, how much more could y'all kill democracy? Like, stop it. Like, we gotta get to a space where we gotta be able to listen to the truth. And us running from meeting to meeting, and I just want to let y'all know, they did not give us a handbook on how to do our jobs. There's no handbook, ain't a CD-ROM, it ain't a video, it's nothing. It's Maria wasn't in a runoff. She started to set up her office, and unlike Matt, who was lucky just to get it handed over to him. Now, y'all know the last 4 aldermen of 20th Ward went to jail. So I wasn't going to Willie's office unless they sacrificed a goat, a cat. They didn't have enough sage and candles for me to go in there. So there is no book on how to do this. And so sometimes I feel bad because we wing it in some spaces. Like, I'm an elected official. My constituents can't afford for me to wing anything. I got to be able to do that work. And so it's made for us to not do our job, but we're figuring that out.
Well, historically, the handbook was Ed Burke. Ed Burke would tell people, I'm not kidding, Ed Burke would basically have even hold sessions. Yeah, he would basically host essentially like orientation sessions for new aldermen and new alderwomen. So are you guys, one quick follow-up question. So there are new committee chairs that, just like under the old mayor, this mayor picked the committee chairs. And Ben and I were both told that was because aldermen still weren't capable of organizing themselves and holding their own votes for their own leaders, so the mayor ended up doing it once again. But are you telling all of us that fundamentally the committee system hasn't evolved that much, that you're still having this issue with the meetings being scheduled at the same time, that the legislative process seems to be sort of top down? Is that still the case? I know you don't have necessarily a means of comparison to the old thing, but what do you see?
It sucks. So if you see me,
that was much more succinct than what I said.
I was trying to say it sucks. So when you see me sitting, I sit next to Brookins, and so a lot of times you'll hear me go, and he'll tell me in the ear, this is what they did. So like this thing where they did the objection. So Carlos called something and then Lopez objected to it. Them two they funny as hell. I'm so sick of them two. They go sit down and let's do some organizing, some work. But anyway, you don't really know what's going on. And so like my first budget hearing, they like say yay or nay. I ain't say nothing. I'm like, we could be voting for all 16-year-olds to jump in the lake. I don't know what I'm voting on, so I ain't saying nothing.
But they don't even give you that. It's like you get sworn in, your first council meeting, get on the floor and figure it out. And then it's not being able to vote individually. We're going to take the last vote that happened. No, I don't vote on that. No, it's a no for me. No, I don't vote on everything. We're not going along to get along. That's what y'all got to know. We just not going, I be texting Matt like, I got to leave the meeting, but ask them what the hell do they think they doing? Am I not does that not happen? We do it to each other all the time. Like, I got to go somewhere else, but this is what we got to do.
All right. That is a great place to stop. We are out of time. Thank you, Matt, Jeanette. Thank you both for coming. Coming from north, coming from south, telling us a little bit what's going on. We really appreciate your service, and we appreciate you coming out tonight. And thanks to all of you for joining us in the conversation.